At Christmas dinner, my sister slapped my baby, then told me I was overreacting. Everyone just sat in silence, until my husband, a military commander, stood up, stared her in the eye, and said, "Get out." She never came back. I thought I knew what family loyalty meant until I watched my own sister strike my infant son, and no one moved. That single, shocking slap didn't just break the silence, it shattered 28 years of my entire world, revealing a truth so ugly, I still sometimes struggle to believe it. It was Christmas, just like any other, or so I thought. December 23rd, the annual Sterling family Christmas dinner, always Vanessa's show. This time, she arrived like a storm, 2 hours late in her pristine white Tesla, dragging in a whole crew with ring lights and cameras. She was documenting her authentic family Christmas experience for her lifestyle blog. I stood in the kitchen doorway, bouncing Lucas, my 6-month-old, against my shoulder. He was fussy, trying to wake up from his nap, and I watched my mother, Patricia, frantically rearrange the entire dining room to fit Vanessa's filming setup. The air smelled of cinnamon and turkey, but underneath it all, that familiar, suffocating tension clung to everything. My dad, Robert, was in his usual corner, scrolling through his phone, a master of selective blindness, a skill perfected over years of ignoring the constant drama between his daughters. Vanessa had been hyping this dinner for weeks online, calling it her family gratitude special. What she conveniently left out was that my husband, David, a military commander, had just returned from a brutal 6-month deployment. Or that we'd driven 3 hours, specifically to introduce our son to his grandparents for the holidays. None of that fit her perfect narrative. David emerged from the guest room, looking sharp in his dress uniform, Lucas freshly changed. Even off-duty, he carried that quiet, steady authority. He caught my eye, and gave me one of those small smiles that silently promised everything would be okay, even when I felt like it absolutely wouldn't be. The dining room had been utterly transformed. Grandma's antique candlesticks were gone, replaced by ring lights. Family photos relocated for better camera angles. Even the napkins were swapped for something more photogenic. Vanessa, in her element, directed her cameraman like she was shooting a commercial, because, really, she was. My mother buzzed around her, adjusting everything to Vanessa's exacting standards. The turkey, meant to be perfectly cooled, was under heat lamps. Side dishes were moved 3 times. The flowers were replaced. I'd learned long ago to keep my mouth shut. Any comment about the absurdity, any hint of criticism, would be met with lectures about supporting family and bigger dreams. The message was always clear: I was small-minded, jealous, threatened by her ambition. David helped me settle Lucas into the high chair we'd brought, an old wooden one from David's grandmother. It felt so out of place among Vanessa's curated aesthetic. Lucas, completely oblivious, gurgled happily, reaching for his toys, about to become an unwitting prop in his aunt's content creation. The meal began with Vanessa's customary gratitude speech, delivered directly to her camera while the rest of us sat in awkward silence. 10 minutes about family traditions and blessings, without a single mention of David's deployment, Lucas's first Christmas, or the actual people sitting at the table. When she finally signaled for the camera to pause, a fragile quiet descended. My mother started serving, ensuring Vanessa's plate was perfect first. My father carved the turkey, nervously glancing at the cameras. David and I exchanged glances, trying to eat while keeping Lucas entertained and quiet. The conversation, predictably, revolved around Vanessa, her brand partnerships, collaborations, the exciting opportunities that just fell into her lap. My mother hung on every word, asking about follower counts. I tried to share updates about our life, David's promotion, parenthood, but my words just seemed to vanish, acknowledged with polite nods before the conversation inevitably veered back to Vanessa's orbit. It was like trying to add ingredients to a meal that was already plated and finished. David noticed, of course. He always did. He'd ask me follow-up questions, pulling me back into conversations that had moved on without me. He shared stories from the base, talked about how proud he was of me. His efforts were kind, but they only highlighted how little interest my own family showed in my actual life. Lucas, for his part, was remarkably well-behaved, content with his teething toys, fascinated by Vanessa's bright lights. But midway through the main course, Vanessa decided she needed some candid family interaction footage. She had her cameraman positioned to capture natural holiday moments, as if anything about this dinner was natural. She told us to just act normal. This is when things started to slide. Vanessa was always a control freak, but the filming pressure, combined with her usual need to be the center of attention, was clearly escalating. She kept calling for resets when conversations weren't flowing, when someone's expression wasn't right, when background noise interfered. Lucas, meanwhile, was getting tired. His cheerful babbling turned into a whimper, that telltale sound every parent recognizes before a full meltdown. I suggested taking him to the guest room for a few minutes to decompress. Vanessa instantly objected. She was in the heart of the segment, people leaving would ruin the content. She insisted babies were adaptable, a little fussing was normal. My mother agreed, saying I was overly cautious. My father just nodded, not looking up. David's jaw tightened. He suggested, gently, a short break from filming. But Vanessa was already pivoting to a more authentic approach. She'd incorporate Lucas's fussing into her narrative about the beautiful messiness of real family life. She started speaking to her camera about flexibility, patience, and how unexpected moments often make the best memories. Lucas's whimpering escalated to outright crying, the heartbreaking, overwhelmed sobs of a tired baby. I reached for him, instinctively. Vanessa held up her hand to stop me. She was still filming, still chasing her authentic moment of holiday chaos, convinced Lucas's distress was adding unfiltered reality to her content. David's face had gone completely still, the look he reserved for critical command decisions. He watched Vanessa with the careful, analytical gaze he usually directed at potential threats. I could see him calculating, weighing options, searching for the diplomatic path that would protect our son. I tried again to reach Lucas. Again, Vanessa stopped me. More directly this time. She said I was being dramatic, that a little crying never hurt anyone. She reminded me she'd babysat in high school, implying I needed to relax my overprotective instincts. Lucas's crying intensified into a desperate wail, a sound that pierced the room, competing with Vanessa's relentless commentary. Everyone else had stopped eating, stopped pretending. Then it happened. Vanessa, clearly frustrated, leaned across the table. Her hand moved so fast, I barely registered it. The sharp crack of her palm against Lucas's cheek echoed through the suddenly silent room. Lucas's crying stopped instantly, replaced by a shocked, breathless gasp. Then came a wail unlike anything I'd ever heard from him, pure bewilderment and pain, searing straight into my soul. His tiny cheek was already red. Nobody moved. My mother sat frozen, fork halfway to her mouth. My father's eyes were wide, but he stayed put. The cameraman kept filming, unsure. Even Vanessa seemed momentarily stunned. But David moved. He rose from his chair with the controlled precision of a soldier. No rush, no explosion, just a deliberate unfolding. His 6'3" frame seemed to fill the room, his uniform making him look even more imposing. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but it carried the kind of authority that commanded absolute attention. Turn off the camera. It wasn't a request. The cameraman complied instantly. The red light vanished. The room fell into an even deeper silence. David walked around the table to Lucas, still sobbing in his high chair. He lifted our son with a practiced, gentle competence, holding him close, murmuring soft reassurances. Lucas's cries began to subside, hiccuping against David's shoulder. Vanessa, David said, his voice still calm, but with an edge that made everyone sit up straighter. You just struck my infant son. He paused, letting the words hang heavy. I need you to explain why you thought that was acceptable. Vanessa's face cycled through shades of shock and defensive red. He was being disruptive, she said, her voice high. I was trying to teach him that crying isn't appropriate at the dinner table. Sometimes children need clear boundaries. He's 6 months old, David replied, that eerie calm still in his voice. He doesn't understand boundaries. He understands someone hurt him. He gently adjusted Lucas, checking the faint red mark on his cheek. And you struck him hard enough to leave a mark. The room remained frozen. My mother finally whispered, Vanessa, honey, you shouldn't have. Don't, David interrupted, his voice not loud, but utterly commanding. Don't minimize this. Don't excuse it. And don't you dare suggest what just happened was acceptable in any way. He turned back to Vanessa, who was now looking around, desperate for support that wasn't coming. You are going to pack up your equipment and leave now. And you are not going to come near my family again until you can explain how you plan to ensure this never happens again. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed. You can't just. I mean, this is my family, too. You can't ban me from family gatherings. Her voice gained strength, defensive anger replacing shock. You're being completely unreasonable. It was barely a tap. You're acting like I committed some terrible crime. David's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted. Any soldier under his command would have recognized the warning. Barely a tap that left a mark on my infant son's face, he said. A tap administered because he was crying, which is literally the only way babies have to communicate distress. He looked around the table, his gaze settling on each family member. And not one of you moved to stop her. Not one of you said a word. You all sat here and watched someone strike a baby, and you're now trying to minimize it because she's family. The truth of his words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My mother's face crumpled with shame. My father finally looked up, but couldn't meet David's gaze. Vanessa's defensive anger wavered, replaced by something that looked almost like recognition. But it was too late. David had made his decision. Natalie, he said, turning to me, his expression gentle despite everything. Gather Lucas's things. We're leaving. He paused, looking back at the family that had just revealed its true nature. And we won't be coming back. I stood on shaking legs, my whole body still reeling. Lucas was calm in David's arms now, but I could see the confusion in his wide eyes, the way he kept touching his cheek. A wave of protective fury, unlike anything I'd ever known, washed over me. As I gathered our things, I heard voices from the dining room, Vanessa's, raised in justification, my mother's, pleading, David's, calm but unmovable. When I returned, David was at the front door, Lucas in his arms. Vanessa stood nearby, face blotchy, my mother wringing her hands. This is insane! Vanessa cried out. You're destroying our family over nothing. Absolutely nothing. He's fine. Look at him. He's not even crying anymore. David stopped at the threshold and turned back. The fact that you think striking a baby is nothing tells me everything I need to know about your judgment, he said. And the fact that the rest of this family is willing to excuse it tells me everything I need to know about their priorities. He opened the door. As we walked to the car, I heard my mother calling after us, begging us to come back. But David's stride never faltered. We drove home in silence, Lucas sleeping peacefully. The faint pink mark was still there. David's hands gripped the steering wheel, his jaw set. It wasn't until we were safely home, Lucas fed and in his crib, that the full weight of it hit me. I sat on our couch, still in my Christmas dress, and started to cry. Not just for that evening, but for all the years of feeling invisible, dismissed, overlooked by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. David sat beside me and pulled me close. He understood. Sometimes, there are no words. I'm proud of you, I finally whispered against his shoulder. For what? He asked. For standing up. For protecting him. For not letting them minimize what happened. I pulled back, looking at him. I don't think anyone has ever defended me like that before. His expression softened, reserved just for us. That's what real family does. They protect each other. They don't excuse abuse, and they don't ask you to tolerate the intolerable for the sake of peace. Later, lying awake, replaying the night, I realized David was right. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of experiences with people who demanded my silence, my accommodation, my willingness to accept less than I deserved. But this time was different. This time, someone had stood up. Someone had said no. Someone had made it clear that this behavior was unacceptable and there would be consequences. As I drifted off to sleep, with my baby safe in the next room, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years, not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict, but the solid peace of knowing my boundaries were respected, my worth recognized. What I didn't know was that this was only the beginning. 3 days later, the war truly began. David was feeding Lucas, and I was staring at the untouched Christmas presents. My phone rang. It was my mother, Patricia, her voice strained. "Natalie, honey, I know you're upset, but we need to talk. Vanessa feels terrible. She didn't sleep. She wants to apologize properly, but she can't if you won't answer her calls." I held the phone away, looking at David, who watched me with concern. Lucas gurgled, oblivious. The red mark on his cheek had faded, but I could still see it. "Mom," I finally said. "She hit my baby. She struck a 6-month-old child because he was crying. I'm not sure what there is to discuss. She barely touched him, Natalie. You're making this into something much bigger than it was. People make mistakes when they're stressed. You know how important her work is." I interrupted, heat rising in my chest. "Mom, she slapped Lucas across the face because he was interfering with her social media content. Do you hear how that sounds?" My mother sighed. "You've always been dramatic about these things, sweetheart. Ever since you were little, you've blown situations out of proportion. Vanessa was just trying to teach him some boundaries. Sometimes children need firm guidance. You've always been dramatic." That phrase hit me like cold water. How many times had I heard it? How many times had my legitimate concerns been dismissed with those exact words? I gripped the phone tighter. "He's 6 months old, Mom. He doesn't understand boundaries. He understands someone hurt him for expressing a basic need." "Now you sound like David," she said, and her tone made me pause. "He's always been very rigid about rules. Military men often are. But families work differently than the army, Natalie. Families require flexibility and forgiveness." David looked up, one eyebrow raised. He'd heard. I saw him making mental notes, gathering intelligence. "What does David have to do with this?" I asked. "Well, he's the one who made the big scene. Vanessa said he was completely unreasonable, ordering people around. He threatened to ban her from the family." Her voice trailed off, as if David's behavior was beyond inappropriate. A cold dread settled in my stomach. "Mom. David protected our son from someone who had just hit him. That's what fathers do. That's what anyone should do when they see a child being hurt. But Vanessa is family, honey. Family means giving people second chances. It means not letting one mistake destroy relationships built over decades. David doesn't understand that because he didn't grow up with us. He doesn't know how we handle things." The conversation continued. My mother painted a version of events where Vanessa barely made contact, everyone overreacted, and David turned a minor family disagreement into a major crisis with his inflexibility. When I finally hung up, David looked at me with the expression he wore after a difficult mission debrief. "Let me guess," he said. "It's our fault." According to my mother, yes. Vanessa feels terrible, but I'm being dramatic and you're controlling because you don't understand how families work. I slumped against the counter. And how do families work? He asked, burping Lucas. Apparently, they work by excusing abuse and expecting the victims to be understanding about it. I felt exhausted. She actually said you don't understand family dynamics because you didn't grow up with them. She's right about that, David said quietly. I didn't grow up with them. I grew up in a family where adults protected children instead of making excuses for people who hurt them. The difference hit me with unexpected force. David's family had its own challenges, but his parents never dismissed abuse or asked victims to be understanding. An hour later, my father called. He'd clearly been coached. Natalie, I think we all need to step back and look at this objectively. Your mother told me about her conversation, and it sounds like there might be some miscommunication about what actually happened. Dad, there's no miscommunication. Vanessa hit Lucas. Multiple people saw it. There's nothing unclear. Well, that's just it. Vanessa said she was just trying to get his attention, maybe redirect his fussing. She said she might have been a little firmer than necessary, but she never intended to hurt him. And honestly, looking at him now, he seems fine. Children are resilient. I stared at the ceiling, trying to process having my own father explain to me what happened to my own child. Dad, intent doesn't matter when we're talking about hitting a baby. The impact matters. The fact that she thought striking him was an appropriate response to crying matters. But that's the thing, sweetheart. She's not experienced with babies. She was just trying to help. Sometimes people make poor choices when they're trying to handle unfamiliar situations. The conversation echoed my mother's. Every concern I raised was met with an explanation for why it wasn't a problem. Every attempt to center Lucas's well-being redirected to Vanessa's feelings, her inexperience, her stress. By the time he hung up, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Had I misunderstood? Was I overreacting? My parents, people I'd trusted my entire life, were telling me my perceptions were wrong, my instincts misguided, my husband's response disproportionate. David found me at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, looking, he later said, like I was in shell shock. What did your dad say? He asked. He said Vanessa didn't mean to hurt Lucas. That she was just trying to help. That maybe she was a little firmer than necessary, but children are resilient. My voice was flat. David was quiet for a long moment. What do you think happened yesterday? He asked. The question surprised me, not because I didn't know, but because no one else had asked me what I thought. Everyone had been telling me what to think. I think my sister hit my baby because he was crying and it was interfering with her filming. I think it was hard enough to leave a mark and shock him into silence. I think it was completely inappropriate and potentially harmful. I paused, clarity returning as I spoke my truth aloud. And I think my parents are more interested in protecting Vanessa from consequences than they are in protecting Lucas from being hurt again. That's what I think too, David said. So the question is, do you trust your own perceptions, or do you trust people who are telling you that what you saw didn't really happen? It was a devastating question. The people asking me to doubt myself were my parents. The person supporting me was my husband, who consistently demonstrated clearer moral boundaries than my family of origin. The third call came that afternoon, from Vanessa herself. Her voice was thick with tears, trembling. This was the vulnerable sister I remembered from childhood. Nadi, I feel so horrible. I haven't been able to eat or sleep. I keep replaying it, wondering how I could have handled things differently. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. I'm glad you called, Vanessa. Lucas is okay, but I was really shocked. I need to understand why you thought hitting him was an appropriate response. That's just it, she said, her voice gaining strength. I don't think I really hit him. I think I just touched his cheek to get his attention. And maybe because everyone was so tense about the filming, it seemed like more than it was. You know how these things get blown out of proportion. My hope evaporated. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to continue the family narrative that what I'd witnessed hadn't really happened. Vanessa, there was a sound when your hand made contact. There was a mark on his cheek. He went from crying to silent in shock before he started wailing. That's not a gentle touch. But that's what I'm trying to tell you. I think everyone's perception was distorted by the stress, the cameras, David's reaction. It created this atmosphere where a normal interaction got interpreted as something much more serious. I gripped the phone, knuckles white. Are you saying I imagined the mark on my baby's face? I'm saying that maybe what looked like a mark was just natural redness from crying. Maybe what sounded like a slap was just contact that seemed louder because the room was quiet. Maybe what felt like a big deal isn't as serious as it seemed. The conversation dragged on for 20 minutes. Vanessa had crafted an alternative reality where her actions were reasonable and everyone else's reactions excessive. She believed she was the victim of misunderstanding. When I finally ended the call, I felt like I'd been wrestling smoke. David found me in Lucas's nursery, watching him sleep. He was peaceful, trusting. The sight of him, so small and defenseless, crystallized something inside me. She's gaslighting me, I said, without turning around. All of them are. They're trying to make me believe what I saw didn't really happen. Yes, David said quietly. They are. Why? Why would my own family try to make me doubt my own perceptions about something this serious? David joined me. Because acknowledging what really happened would require them to take action they're not willing to take. It would mean holding Vanessa accountable, which might disrupt their family dynamic. It would mean admitting they failed to protect Lucas, which would force them to examine their own behavior. So instead, they make you the problem. The fourth call came that evening, from my mother again. Her tone had shifted from pleading to frustrated, almost sharp. Natalie, I'm concerned about how you're handling this. You're being very rigid and unforgiving, which isn't like you. I'm wondering if maybe the stress of new motherhood is affecting your judgment. I felt David tense beside me. The suggestion that my judgment was compromised by postpartum issues was a low blow. Mom, my judgment is fine. My priorities are clear. Protecting my child from people who think it's acceptable to hit him isn't negotiable. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. You're characterizing this as hitting when it was clearly something much less serious. You're creating conflict where none needs to exist. You're making choices that are going to damage family relationships permanently over something that could be resolved with basic communication and forgiveness. What would resolution look like to you? I asked, genuinely curious. Vanessa apologizes for the misunderstanding. You accept she didn't mean any harm. David acknowledges his reaction was excessive, and we all move forward with better communication and more patience for each other's differences. I let that sink in. In her vision, everyone was equally responsible. Vanessa would offer a non-apology. I would accept blame for misinterpreting. David would admit to overreacting. And Lucas, the actual victim, would be completely absent. What about Lucas? I asked. What does resolution look like for him? What do you mean? I mean, what protections would be put in place to ensure this doesn't happen again? What boundaries would be established to keep him safe? What accountability measures would ensure Vanessa has processed why hitting a baby is never acceptable? My mother was quiet. Then, dismissively, you're overthinking this. He's fine. He's not going to remember any of this. You're creating trauma where none exists. And there it was, the heart of our fundamental disagreement. In their worldview, trauma only existed if the victim remembered it. A baby who couldn't form lasting memories couldn't be truly harmed. Adult comfort and family harmony took precedence over protecting children from experiences they might not even remember. After I hung up, David and I sat in silence. The movie paused. We both processed what was now clear: this wasn't going to blow over. My family wasn't going to understand. We had to make decisions about how to move forward with people who fundamentally disagreed with our basic values about protecting children. I feel like I'm going crazy, I admitted. 3 different people have told me that what I saw didn't really happen. People I've trusted my entire life are asking me to doubt my own perceptions about something this basic. That's the point, David said. They need you to doubt yourself, because if you trust what you saw, you'll make choices they don't want you to make. If you believe Lucas was actually hurt, you'll protect him from people who might hurt him again. They can't have that. But why? Why is protecting Vanessa from consequences more important than protecting Lucas from being hurt? David was quiet for a long time. I think your family has spent a long time organizing itself around managing Vanessa's needs and emotions. She's the center of attention, the source of drama, the person everyone has to accommodate. Protecting that system is more important than protecting individual members who threaten it. His words hit with uncomfortable accuracy. Growing up, family decisions had often revolved around Vanessa's mood, her plans. My achievements were downplayed if they threatened to overshadow her. I'd accepted it as normal. It never occurred to me that this system could prioritize her comfort over a baby's safety. The final call came close to midnight. Vanessa again. Her voice was softer, less defensive. Natalie, I know it's late, but I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about how to fix this mess. I miss you. I miss being close to you like we were when we were kids. A pang of nostalgia. I miss that too, I said. But I need you to understand why yesterday was so serious. Lucas is my baby, and seeing someone hurt him triggered every protective instinct. I get that. I really do. And I would never intentionally hurt him. You have to know that about me. Maybe I was too focused on the filming. Maybe I wasn't thinking clearly, but I would never deliberately harm a child. It felt like progress. An acknowledgement. For the first time all day, I felt a glimmer of hope. Thank you for saying that. I know you wouldn't hurt him on purpose, but impact matters as much as intent. And the impact was that he got hurt. What I need is some assurance that you understand why it happened and how to prevent it from happening again. Of course. I think what I need to do is be more mindful when I'm around children, especially when I'm stressed or working. Maybe I should ask for help instead of trying to handle situations on my own. It wasn't a complete apology, but it felt like movement. We talked for a few more minutes about boundaries, communication. When we hung up, I felt cautiously optimistic. Maybe this could be worked out. But the next morning brought a text message that shattered everything. It was from Chloe Martinez, our neighbor and close friend at Fort Henderson, saw Vanessa's Instagram story. Are you okay? I opened Instagram with shaking hands. Family drama and moving forward. A carefully crafted narrative about the challenges of blending families with different parenting styles, the stress of documenting family moments, and the importance of forgiveness and grace when misunderstandings occur. Her version, a minor disagreement escalated by miscommunication and different expectations. She painted herself as someone trying to help with a fussy baby, misunderstood by overprotective parents unfamiliar with extended family dynamics. No mention of hitting Lucas. No acknowledgement of harm. Just a learning experience about family communication. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, praising her maturity and grace. I screenshotted the entire story. Less than 12 hours after what I thought was a breakthrough, Vanessa had publicly reframed the incident. She'd taken our private conversation about her poor judgment and transformed it into a public narrative about other people's unreasonable expectations. She had positioned herself as the victim of family drama, not the adult who had struck a baby. And she did it all with plausible deniability, never technically lying, but never telling the truth. When David came home and found me crying, I showed him the phone. He read it twice, his expression grim. "She played you," he said. The late-night call, the apparent acknowledgement, the promise to be mindful, all designed to get information she could use to craft this narrative. I felt foolish, but more than that, betrayed. By someone I'd loved since childhood. The phone started ringing again. My mother. I didn't answer. I was done. Instead, I did something I'd never done before in a family conflict. I started documenting everything. What happened at dinner, direct quotes, screenshots of Vanessa's story, notes about each phone call, the specific language they used to minimize and question my judgment. For the first time, I was treating my family like potential adversaries, not trusted allies. As I organized the evidence, I realized this pattern had been happening for much longer. This was how they always handled conflicts that threatened their narrative. This was how they managed Vanessa's behavior. This was how they had trained me, over decades, to doubt my own perceptions and prioritize family harmony over my own well-being. But this time was different. This time, the victim wasn't just me. It was my infant son. And this time, I had a partner who supported my perceptions. This time, I was going to fight back. The documentation process revealed patterns I hadn't consciously recognized. Old texts and social media posts showed the same cycle. Vanessa creates a problem, followed by explanations and excuses, then pressure on everyone else to accommodate her version of events. I found a thread from 2 years ago, when Vanessa was 4 hours late to Grandma Eleanor's memorial because she was filming a makeup collaboration. Instead of addressing her disrespect, the family discussed how grief affects people differently. My hurt was reframed as selfishness. Another thread from last spring, Vanessa returned my mother's car with significant damage, called it a minor parking lot incident. My mother paid the deductible. The more I looked, the clearer it became. I had been trained to accept this dynamic. Minimize my needs, question my perceptions, prioritize everyone else's comfort. Christmas dinner wasn't an anomaly. It was the most extreme example of a pattern that had shaped my life for decades. David found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by my case file. He poured coffee, studying my organized evidence. "This looks like intelligence gathering," he observed. "That's exactly what it is," I said. "I'm trying to understand how they do this. How they consistently make me the problem when they're the ones causing harm." I gestured to a timeline of conflicts. "Look at this pattern. Every single time, the same thing." David examined it. Incident, denial, reframing, pressure to forgive, eventual acceptance of the family narrative. It's sophisticated. They've created a system that protects Vanessa from consequences while training everyone else to doubt their own judgment. But why me specifically? Why am I always the one being asked to be more understanding, more forgiving? "Because you're the one who challenges," he said. "You're the one who notices when things don't add up. You're the one who asks uncomfortable questions. They need to neutralize you because you're the threat to their system." My phone buzzed. "My mother again. Honey, I saw that you read Vanessa's Instagram story. I hope you can see that she's really trying to move forward. Maybe we could all get together this weekend to talk through everything calmly." I showed David. He shook his head. "They're trying to reset the narrative again. Get everyone in the same room, apply social pressure, and convince you to accept their version of events for the sake of family peace." "But what if I'm wrong?" I asked, a sliver of doubt still lingering. "What if I am being too rigid? What if there is a way to work through this?" David sat down his coffee cup and looked at me seriously. "Let me ask you something. If one of my soldiers struck a baby during a family gathering and then spent the next week convincing everyone that it hadn't really happened, while publicly reframing themselves as the victim, what would you think I should do?" The question clarified everything. If this were happening to anyone else, I would be horrified. I would advise them to protect their child, to maintain boundaries. I would tell them to document everything and stay away from people who think hitting babies is negotiable. Right. So why is your family different? I didn't have a good answer. The only reason was because these were people I'd loved my entire life, whose approval I'd sought since childhood. But none of those reasons justified exposing Lucas to people who might hurt him again. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Chloe Martinez. She'd been following the situation and had information that changed everything. Natalie, I need to tell you something. I've been going through Vanessa's social media more carefully, and I found some posts from earlier this year that I think you need to see. She sent screenshots. Posts about the beauty of new beginnings and joy of expanding family, with baby props and a newborn. The problem? They were published weeks before Lucas was born. She'd been using stock photos and borrowed babies to create content about an experience she hadn't even had yet. There's more, Chloe said when I called her back. I found a whole series of posts about family traditions and holidays featuring photos from last Christmas dinner. The one you and David missed because of his deployment. She's been creating this narrative about close family relationships that doesn't actually exist. I felt sick. Vanessa had built a brand around fictional family content. Her followers believed she was documenting authentic moments, but she was crafting staged content. For engagement and sponsorships. The Christmas dinner incident suddenly made terrifying sense. Lucas's crying hadn't just threatened her filming schedule, it had threatened her entire brand identity as someone who effortlessly managed beautiful family moments. When David came home, I showed him everything. She's been using your family as content for months, he said. Creating fictional narratives for her audience. The Christmas dinner wasn't about family time at all. It was about creating content to support her brand. Lucas and I were just props. And when Lucas interfered by acting like a normal baby, she prioritized her content over his well-being. The realization was devastating, but clarifying. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment by someone overwhelmed by stress. This was a calculated decision by someone who viewed our family as raw material for her business, willing to harm a child to protect her commercial interest. I spent the evening going through more of Vanessa's content. Photos from our wedding, stories about David's deployment, even speculation about future children, all used for sponsored posts. Most disturbing were the posts about Patricia and Robert as deeply involved, loving grandparents, despite their minimal interest in Lucas. The gap between her public narrative and our private reality was enormous. The next morning, more texts from family, all encouraging me to attend a family meeting my mother had scheduled. The language was eerily similar, suggesting coordination. But I was done being managed. Instead of responding, I called our insurance company to report the incident involving Lucas. I also called our pediatrician. Dr. Walsh immediately scheduled an appointment and asked for photos of any marks. The pediatric appointment was both validating and heartbreaking. Dr. Walsh examined Lucas, documented the fading mark, and stressed her serious concern, regardless of intent or family relationship. Parents need to trust their protective instincts, she told me. When something feels wrong, it usually is wrong. Your job is to keep Lucas safe, not to manage other people's feelings about your safety measures. She provided resources for family violence and documenting incidents. That afternoon, Captain Ryan Torres, one of David's closest colleagues, called. He and his wife, Maria, had become good friends. Natalie, Maria, and I want you to know we're behind you 100%. What happened to Lucas is unacceptable, and the way your family is handling it is concerning. A wave of relief washed over me. Thank you, Ryan. I've been starting to doubt my own judgment. Don't. You're a good mother, and you're doing exactly what you should be doing. Ryan also shared that David had been consulting military legal services about protecting our family. The military took family violence seriously. That evening, I made a decision, terrifying but liberating. I drafted a group text to my parents and Vanessa, stating our boundaries. We would not attend family gatherings until Vanessa acknowledged what happened and demonstrated genuine accountability. The response was immediate and intense. My phone buzzed with frantic calls and angry texts. My mother begged me not to destroy the family. My father asked me to reconsider this drastic response to a minor incident. Vanessa accused me of being vindictive and manipulative. But the message that stopped me cold came from Linda, my mother's sister. Saw the Instagram situation. This isn't the first time. Call me when you're ready to hear about the others. What others? David asked when I showed him. I have no idea, but Linda wouldn't say something like that unless she had specific information. I called her immediately. Honey, I've been watching, Linda said. And I think it's time you knew some things about your family that they've been keeping from you. The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours and changed everything I thought I knew about my family history. Linda told me about incidents dating back to Vanessa's teenage years, being rough with younger cousins, harsh with children she babysat, inappropriate with kids at family gatherings. In every case, the family had minimized it, covered it up, protected Vanessa. I've watched her parents train that girl to believe she can hurt people without consequences, and I've watched them train everyone else to accept it. Linda also revealed something crucial. Vanessa had been born with developmental delays requiring extensive early intervention. My parents had spent years advocating for her, protecting her. The problem was, they never transitioned from protecting a child with special needs to holding an adult accountable for harmful behavior. She knows exactly what she's doing, Linda said. She's learned that if she can make people feel sorry for her, she can get away with almost anything. And your parents enable it because they've spent so many years seeing her as vulnerable that they can't recognize when she's being manipulative. By the time I hung up, I felt like I had a completely different map of my family territory. Decades of confusing interactions now made sense. The pattern of protecting Vanessa wasn't new, it was a system refined over years. And Lucas wasn't her first victim. The next morning, I woke with absolute clarity. I wasn't just protecting Lucas from one bad incident. I was breaking a generational cycle of abuse and enablement. I called Linda back, she agreed to provide written statements. I reached out to other family members. Some were reluctant, but others were relieved to finally talk. By the end of the week, I had a comprehensive picture, written statements from multiple witnesses, documentation of previous incidents, clear evidence that Christmas dinner was part of a much larger pattern. David and I spent that weekend planning. We weren't interested in revenge, but we were committed to protecting Lucas and preventing future incidents. We decided to share our documentation with family members who had children. We would maintain our boundaries, regardless of their response. Linda's information made it clear, this wasn't about better communication. It required fundamental changes in accountability, changes my family refused to make. Most importantly, we decided to build our own family traditions, our own support systems, that didn't depend on people who prioritized dysfunction over protecting children. Lucas deserved to grow up in an environment where his safety was never negotiable. As I organized the evidence, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of having complete information and the power to act on it. I was no longer the confused family member being told my perceptions were wrong. I understood exactly what was happening and why. The breaking point came when I received a certified letter from Vanessa's attorney, demanding I cease a defamation campaign. The letter claimed I was spreading false information, damaging Vanessa's reputation. I stared at the legal letterhead in disbelief. I hadn't posted anything online. The only campaign was documenting actual events and sharing factual information with relatives who had young children. David read it over my shoulder. They're trying to intimidate you into silence. This is what people do when they know they're guilty but can't afford to have the truth come out. The letter demanded I sign a statement acknowledging no assault had occurred. In exchange, they wouldn't pursue legal action for defamation and intentional interference with business relationships. Business relationships, I repeated, feeling the full weight of it. She's not worried about family harmony. She's worried about her brand. I called Janet Morrison, an attorney Linda recommended, specializing in child protection. Janet's initial assessment was reassuring. The letter is largely bluster. Truth is an absolute defense. But the fact that they're escalating to legal threats suggests they're feeling genuine pressure. Janet explained that Vanessa's business model relied heavily on her public image. If sponsors learned about her history with children, the financial impact would be devastating. The legal threats weren't about reputation, they were about income. Prepare for them to escalate further. People with a lot to lose can become dangerous when cornered. Document everything, stay safe, and don't engage directly. Our strategy session revealed options: a restraining order, our own legal action for emotional distress, reporting to Child Protective Services. Janet helped me understand I wasn't required to keep family secrets that put children at risk. The evidence I'd gathered wasn't gossip, it was information other parents had a right to know. That evening, I copied everything and prepared packages for family members with young children. Each included documentation of Christmas dinner, witness statements about previous events, and information about Vanessa's pattern of avoiding accountability. I wasn't asking anyone to choose sides. I was simply providing information. The response was swift and explosive. My phone rang constantly. Some were supportive, grateful for information that explained incidents they'd witnessed but been told to forget. Others were furious, accusing me of destroying the family. My mother called in hysterics, demanding to know why I was attacking Vanessa with lies. "Those things happened years ago," she sobbed. "Vanessa was just a child. Why are you dragging up ancient history to hurt her now?" "Because it's not ancient history, Mom. It's a pattern that's continuing today. And other parents deserve to know about that pattern when they're making decisions about their children's safety." "But she's changed. She's grown up. She hit Lucas 6 days ago, Mom. Whatever changes you think she's made clearly haven't addressed the fundamental problem." The conversation deteriorated. My mother alternated between begging and threatening to cut me out of the family. It was the same emotional manipulation, but this time, I recognized it and refused to be swayed. My father's response was different, more strategic. He called late, his tone controlled. "Natalie, I understand you're upset, but this approach is going to hurt everyone, including you and David. If this information becomes public, it could affect David's military career. Have you thought about the security clearance implications of being involved in a family scandal?" It was a low blow, trying to use David's professional obligations to silence me, but it also revealed how little Robert understood military values. "Dad, David's career is built on integrity and protecting people. His command would be more concerned if he failed to protect his own child from someone with a history of violence. But Vanessa doesn't have a history of violence. These are isolated incidents. You're making her sound like a dangerous predator when she's just someone who's made some mistakes." "Mistakes are accidents, Dad. Patterns are choices. And a pattern of hurting children, followed by a pattern of avoiding consequences, isn't something I'm going to help hide anymore." The most devastating call came from my cousin Sarah, a mother of 2, who had been present during several incidents Linda described. "Natalie, I need you to know that I believe everything you've documented. I was there for some of those incidents, and I've been carrying guilt about staying quiet for years." Her voice was shaky but determined. "When I saw what happened to Lucas and then saw how everyone was handling it, I realized I couldn't protect my own kids if I couldn't even acknowledge what I'd witnessed." Sarah shared details about a family reunion where Vanessa had pushed Sarah's younger brother downstairs after he'd knocked over something she was filming. He suffered a concussion. The family called it an accident. "I was 17 and scared of causing drama, so I went along with it, but I've regretted it ever since. When I had my own children, I made sure they were never alone with Vanessa, even though I couldn't explain why. Sarah's testimony was powerful. But she also revealed something that changed my understanding of the current situation. Natalie, there's something else. Vanessa isn't just worried about her current business. She's been in talks with a major network about a reality show centered around her family content. The Christmas dinner footage was supposed to be part of her audition reel. The information hit me like a physical blow. Vanessa had been filming us for a potential TV show without our knowledge or consent. Lucas's first Christmas, treated as raw material for entertainment. When he'd interfered, she'd prioritized the footage. The network executives are supposed to review her submission this week, Sarah continued. That's probably why she's escalating the legal threats. If this information becomes public before they make their decision, it could destroy the biggest opportunity she's ever had. I shared this with David. His reaction was immediate, cold fury. She exploited our family for commercial purposes without our consent. And when our infant son interfered with her production, she assaulted him, he said, his voice deadly calm. And now she's threatening legal action to prevent us from protecting other children from similar treatment. David's military training kicked in. We're not just dealing with a family conflict anymore. We're dealing with someone who's willing to harm children for financial gain and use legal intimidation to cover it up. That makes her a legitimate threat. The next morning, David contacted his command. His commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, made it clear the military takes these situations very seriously. We can't have personnel being blackmailed or intimidated by family members, especially when child safety is involved. We'll provide whatever support you need. The military's backing was both practical and psychological. It meant David wouldn't face professional consequences for standing up, and it gave us access to legal resources. Most importantly, it validated our decision to prioritize child protection. That afternoon, Janet Morrison called with an update. She'd drafted a response that turned the tables. Instead of defending, we were putting Vanessa on notice about potential legal action for assault, emotional distress, and commercial exploitation without consent. The beauty of truth as a defense, Janet explained, is that it forces the other side to prove their claims are false. Given your evidence, that's going to be very difficult. More likely, they'll realize that pursuing this legally will only create more public exposure. The letter was a masterpiece. It detailed the Christmas dinner incident, the witness statements about previous events, and our evidence of commercial exploitation. It made it clear we weren't seeking media attention, but if Vanessa wanted to make it public, we were prepared. The response to our letter was immediate silence. No calls, no texts, no social media from Vanessa. The entire Sterling family apparatus had gone dark. But the silence was broken 3 days later. Jessica Chen, a producer from the network, called. She'd somehow obtained information and wanted to discuss Vanessa's family content and the authenticity of her relationships. I stuck to the facts, confirming the filming, the incident, the fictional nature of Vanessa's portrayal of our family. Thank you for your honesty, Jessica said. This information is very helpful as we evaluate our programming decisions. Networks have to be extremely careful about liability, especially when children are involved. 2 hours later, my phone exploded. Word had gotten back to Vanessa. My mother called, crying, begging me to clarify. My father texted about family loyalty. But the most revealing response came from Vanessa herself, who showed up at our house unannounced. David answered the door. She stood on our porch, mascara streaking, hands shaking with rage. You destroyed everything, she screamed as soon as she saw me. Years of work, hundreds of thousands of followers, business relationships, all gone because you couldn't just let things go. I didn't destroy anything, Vanessa. I protected my child and shared factual information with people who needed it. If that destroyed your business, maybe your business was built on lies. It wasn't lies. It was content creation. It was storytelling. Everyone knows social media isn't completely literal. It's about creating aspirational content. David stepped between us, his posture commanding her to lower her voice. You used our family as props for fictional content without our consent. And when our baby interfered with your production, you hit him. There's nothing aspirational about that. I barely touched him. And only because he was ruining months of work. Do you have any idea how hard it is to create authentic family content when people won't cooperate with the vision? The admission was stunning. In her fury, Vanessa revealed she genuinely believed Lucas should have cooperated with her filming, and striking him was justified by the importance of her content. She wasn't apologetic about hurting him, she was angry he'd failed to perform. Get off our property, David said quietly. And don't come back. You can't just cut me out. I'm Lucas's aunt. You have no rights to access a child you assaulted, David replied. And if you come here again, I'll call the police. Vanessa's mask slipped completely. The polished influencer, the victim narrative, the claims of misunderstanding, all fell away. She genuinely believed she was entitled to use our family, and our refusal was a betrayal. She left screaming threats, but her rage actually strengthened our position. David had recorded the entire interaction, capturing her admission and her anger. Devastating evidence if she tried legal action. That night, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Christmas dinner, complete certainty. Vanessa's visit had stripped away any remaining doubt. She wasn't sorry for hurting Lucas, she was angry that hurting Lucas had consequences. The war wasn't really about one incident. It was about children's right to be protected, and adults' obligation to speak up. We'd chosen protection over peace, truth over comfort, our child's safety over our family's dysfunction. The consequences were painful, but liberating. For the first time, I was free from the obligation to manage other people's emotions at the expense of my own well-being and my child's safety. 6 months later, Lucas took his first steps in our backyard. David and I cheered. He wobbled between the garden and the fence, his face lit up with pure joy. No cameras, no staged lighting, no audience beyond the two people who loved him most. It was authentic in a way Vanessa's manufactured content never could be. The legal threats had evaporated. Janet Morrison crafted a settlement, privacy about family matters, but we could share safety information with relatives. Vanessa agreed to counseling, though I doubted her sincerity. The reality show opportunity vanished. Jessica Chin later told me multiple corroborating accounts about Vanessa's history with children made the liability too significant. My parents initially maintained I was destroying the family, but as more relatives came forward with their own experiences, their narrative became impossible to sustain. Linda organized a family meeting where several witnesses shared their accounts. My mother was devastated, genuinely seeming unaware of the extent of Vanessa's patterns. She'd managed individual incidents, missing the larger picture. My father, characteristically, retreated. Neither apologized directly, but their approach shifted from defending Vanessa to avoiding the topic. They stopped pressuring me to reconcile and began interacting with Lucas during brief, supervised, albeit stilted, visits. It wasn't the warm grandparent relationship I'd hoped for, but it was workable within our new boundaries. Vanessa herself essentially disappeared from our family dynamics. Her social media shifted away from family content. She'd moved to Los Angeles. Linda reported her engagement had dropped significantly. The most surprising development was from extended family. Several cousins and aunts reached out, thanking me for speaking up. Sarah became a close ally. My cousin Marcus was particularly grateful. He'd been planning to ask Vanessa to babysit his toddler, unaware of her history. "You probably prevented something terrible," he told me. The military community at Fort Henderson rallied around us, demonstrating the difference between chosen family and biological family. Colonel Martinez ensured David faced no professional consequences. Captain Torres and Maria became particularly close, and we began creating our own authentic family traditions. You know what I love about our gatherings? Maria observed during a barbecue. Nobody's performing. Nobody's managing anyone else's emotions. We're just enjoying each other's company, without agenda or drama. Dr. Walsh monitored Lucas's development, pleased to note no lasting effects. Children are resilient when they have consistent, protective caregivers. Lucas clearly knows he's safe with you. That meant more to me than any family reconciliation. We prioritized Lucas's well-being, and he was thriving. David was promoted to lieutenant colonel, partly for his leadership during what his superiors called a complex family crisis requiring protection of dependents while maintaining professional obligations. His integrity was specifically noted. I started volunteering with a family advocacy program on base, helping military spouses navigate similar conflicts between loyalty to birth families and protection of their children. Many women I worked with experienced the same gaslighting. One young mother, Angela, decided to limit her in-laws' access to her children. I kept thinking I was being too sensitive, she told me. But watching how they treated my concerns made me realize that people who truly cared about my children would respect my judgment. Linda became an unexpected, ongoing source of support. Watching you stand up for your baby gave me permission to finally tell the truth about things I've been keeping quiet for decades. She also provided updates about my parents. They'd started counseling, trying to understand how they'd enabled Vanessa. Your mother is starting to understand that protecting Vanessa from consequences didn't actually help anyone, Linda reported. It's taken her this long to realize that love sometimes means allowing people to face the results of their choices. Lucas's first birthday party was a celebration of authentic bonds, not obligatory social connections. We invited our chosen family, Linda, and supportive cousins. The gathering was small but genuine. David's toast brought tears to my eyes, to Lucas, who taught us the difference between family that demands your silence and family that earns your trust. May ye always know the difference between love that protects and love that enables. The contrast with previous family celebrations was stark. No performing, no emotional management, no walking on eggshells. Lucas played freely, surrounded by adults who modeled healthy boundaries and unwavering commitment to child protection. The most surprising gift came from Eleanor's sister, Margaret, 93 years old. She'd heard about our situation and requested a visit. Eleanor always said that family isn't about blood connections or social obligations, Margaret told us. She said family is about people who show up for each other when it matters, who tell the truth even when it's difficult, and who protect those who can't protect themselves. Margaret revealed Eleanor had been concerned about Vanessa's behavior for years, but had been dismissed. Eleanor would be proud of what you did. You honored her values even when your own parents wouldn't. The validation from Eleanor's sister felt like a blessing from beyond. Now, watching Lucas navigate our backyard, confident and fearless, I understood we'd given him something invaluable, the security of knowing the adults in his life would always prioritize his well-being. David joined me on the patio as Lucas discovered a butterfly. Any regrets? He asked quietly, though I knew his answer. None, I replied, watching Lucas's pure joy. Look at him. He's fearless because he knows he's protected. He's curious because he's never been punished for being a normal child. He's confident because he's never been told that his needs don't matter. David nodded. He'll grow up knowing that love means protection, not accommodation. That family means safety, not obligation. That his worth isn't negotiable, even with people who share his DNA. The lessons learned through crisis became the foundation for our family culture. Lucas would understand healthy relationships required mutual respect, that boundaries were self-care, and that love sometimes meant saying no to harmful compliance. As the sun set, I felt complete peace. We traded the familiar dysfunction of my birth family for the uncertain work of building authentic relationships. Lucas would never remember the Christmas dinner that changed everything, but he would grow up with the benefits of our decision. He would know his parents could be trusted, that his needs mattered, and that love never required accepting harm. The war had ended with the victory that mattered most, a child who was safe, loved, and free to develop his own authentic self, without performing for anyone else's emotional needs. In losing my birth family, I gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that I could build the kind of family that truly deserved the name.